Interoperable Mastering Format. It's taking off this year. 2019 will be a big year for it. Now let's talk about how it affects us in the production community. Interoperable Mastering Format. Now, as we know, the industry has changed a lot in the last few years, specifically because we are now focusing on streaming platforms as our main source of delivery for content that is created. Now, they have a different requirement than our traditional making hundreds of different versions of a movie in different file formats, 25, 30, 29.997, blah, blah, blah. All those formats, and having specific delivery requirements for every part of the world, and having a facility which is answering those needs as they're required based on when you actually get a distribution contract for those areas. That's all changing, because now we have things like these big companies like Netflix and others who are doing it for, well, the whole world. So they want you to deliver that content in a way where they can basically push a button and strip out the format they require for that part of the world. This is changing the way we do distribution, typically in a really, really good way. But let's look at it. I want us to look at this issue from, like, if you're a small facility or a small production company and you want to deliver to Netflix, for example, they've got some really nice, thick and chunky and technical delivery documents, and they're all pushing us to doing IMF. Now, the main reason for this is because I like to think of it as looking at how the industry is going in terms of how we make content. It is a little bit of an ask for companies to make, to do the localization for the content everywhere. Typically, you would want to do a IMF based deliverable, and that's been pumped up to Netflix. And then from there, you've got other companies who are doing the localizations, building on top of that, and having like an IMF studio tool. Typically, it's becoming internet based, where different companies can come in and then add edits, add different captions, add different audios to the base version which is already up there. Now, this is obviously saving a lot of time and money, but how do we as a community deal with that? Well, this is an interesting, this is still something we're all learning about, and tools are still being made. But the main change that we've seen in the last year or so, I spoke in the previous video about DCP creation. This is also a big issue about the tools that are coming for IMF has an effect on the DCP creation. But these tools are that tools that you master in, where you make the final color decisions and all those important decisions, are also the tools which export it into the format which can be imported into the IMF studio of choice, or whatever that's going to be. Typically, I see that in the future being a cloud-based service from Netflix or something, where you're uploading the assets as required and you're adding it to the actual movie. So each of the different types of movie or regions can be stripped off from this IMF collection of assets which has been built in Netflix. Obviously, this will change over time. I see a lot of companies taking on board the creation of this universal asset themselves, and MAM, or what's it stand for? Media mass management systems. They'll probably become more prolific and easier to use and cheaper over the next coming years as companies take on this task themselves for managing their assets. Because the good thing about standards is a standard is a standard and it doesn't change, and once it's been developed once, you don't have to develop it again. And that's why standards and open source have really become a very big deal for the production community. You would have seen recently that a lot of the movement for IMF is all open source based, or SMPTE standards, and also there's new movements via the industry to promote open technologies in the production community, because doing so and adopting those standards has been stupendously effective for the general success of the web and other industries like Google's based on and everything. For example, God forbid, Microsoft's Azure service, their cloud service is 60% Linux based. And then you can see a company which once said that Linux was the cancer of the software industry, is now more than anything based on open source solutions, buying GitHub, etc. Again, a tool which is leveraged or is blossoming the open source communities of the world. And so these advantages of using these open source tools, we can, take advantage of them too in the production community as well. And specifically with this story just keeps on rolling on to other issues. For example, what are the production tools of the future? There's all this argument about Apple. Will Apple be the tool of the future? Will Linux become more involved? For example, Linux and most of the big companies which are the most successful in the world, like Google's and Amazon's of the world, their solutions are all based on Linux open source software operating systems. And there's reasons for that. And those reasons could exist for us in the production community as well. So let's keep that in mind. And there's another vlog I wanted to talk about how these standards and access to these open technologies and software and cloud services, etc., are starting to really take effect. It actually reminds me, I want to do a blog about the cloud and how up until recently I think the cloud has failed us in the production community, but let's look at that and analyse it again today, because I think that's changing. But yeah, we'll look at that in the next video. But yes, that's another little talk about how the production community is changing based on new ideas and issues and from other industries, and how they're starting to affect us and allow us to see into how those technologies can affect us as production workers in the world. Anyway, that's James Gardner at the CineTechGeek. Bye for now.